Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the true crime case of Hollie Gazzard. Hollie was 20 years old and she lived with her parents, Amanda Gazzard and Nick Gazzard. She also had an older sister called Chloe, and by all accounts when they were growing up she was really close with Chloe. They had a really good relationship. And they all lived in Gloucester in England. I'd just like to give my normal disclaimer that I mean no offence to anyone I'm going to talk about today. I've just gathered the information off the internet, compiled it into a video, and it's for educational purposes. Hollie was very fun. She was a bright, bubbly, vivacious girl. She loved going out and enjoying herself and spending time with her family and friends. She had a really close relationship with her father. Hollie worked as a hairdresser in a salon, and she would always change the colour of her hair, her hairstyle all the time. She loved experimenting with it, and she never really had the same hair twice. This was her dream job basically. She absolutely loved it. And she would work at this salon for around about 3 years. And in this time she became really good friends with her boss. Hollie had always had a passion of travelling, and obviously, like I said, she really enjoyed doing the hair. So her father Nick suggested that because travelling can obviously be quite dangerous, one of the safest routes would be to do it on a cruise ship. This combines her hairstyling with travelling around the world on a cruise ship, and she thought the idea was fantastic. So that's what she did. She went in and did all of her training to enable herself to go on this cruise ship basically. She told everyone that's what she wanted to do. She was really excited, and her family and friends were really excited for her. Hollie did get her dream job on the cruise ship like she wanted, and because of this she packed in the job at the salon and ended up working in a bar in the evenings part-time just to tide her over until it came up to the point where she would obviously join the cruise. That's really when Hollie's troubles began, and in February 2013 she met a man called Asher Maslin. Asher was 21 years old, a year older than Hollie. He grew up in nearby Cheltenham, and he was a regular in this bar. He was a security guard off and on, and he did pretty much the moment he saw Hollie, he started pursuing her. He were asking for a number, and he continued this until eventually she did give him his number and they started going out on a few dates. By all accounts, she was really excited. She did tell her friends though that she'd met this guy and he was coming on a bit strong, and he really wouldn't leave her alone. Obviously this was early on. It does kind of bring up some red flags immediately as to the kind of person that he was. But again, she really liked him, and in the early stages when you're really excited, you kind of brush things like that under the rug sometimes. They began dating, everything was really good. She'd tell her friends of how much of a connection they had and how well he would treat her. And in 8 weeks' time, she would be leaving to start her dream job. So obviously the timing on this kind of relationship wasn't great, but at the end of the day, she couldn't help how she felt about Asher. Hollie and Asher spent all of their time together. Her friends even thought that she was falling in love with him. The relationship was moving really quickly, but again, Hollie really liked him, so she decided that she wanted her parents to meet him. And when she brought him round, her mother saw him and immediately said, "Oh, it's him." Basically, she'd worked as a dinner lady in the school that he went to, and he was kind of seen as a bit of a Jack the Lad. And he had somewhat of a bad reputation in school, but she wasn't one to judge on that. Obviously, in school, people change, things like that, and they try and impress people. So she didn't judge him on that. They aired it all out. Her father's first impressions were that he had the gift of the gab and he was very confident. In April of 2013, Hollie had been seeing Asher for a couple of months, but it was now time for Hollie to set sail and start her dream job on the cruise. She'd be cruising around the Caribbean for probably about 9 months. After 1 week of being at sea, Hollie then rings her father and asks for him to arrange transport for her to come home. Now this obviously really shocked her family and friends, and her friends did actually try and convince her to stay a bit longer. Maybe you've not found your feet yet, just give it a little bit more time for you to settle in and you'll probably love it, because obviously she was so excited about going here and it was the dream that she'd wanted for so long. Why suddenly After only spending 1 week there, did she want to come home? Anyway, it was her life, her choice. So her father, Nick, arranged for her to come home. And she told him that it was because she was really homesick. Her friends actually stated that they felt like something was pulling Hollie back. Maybe this was Asher, or maybe she was just missing her friends and family. I don't think anyone really knew the reasoning behind it. It was later believed that Asher was actually the factor as to why she came home. He would constantly ring her, text her, asking for her to come home, making it really difficult for her to actually continue. When you've got someone constantly in your ear telling you need to come home, it's not good for you, things like that, you kind of start to believe it. And she probably, if this was the case, she probably got tired of him messaging her all the time and thought, it's not worth it, I'll come home. And as soon as she returns home, a relationship with Asher continues. But this time, he's a lot more possessive over her. He lost her once, he wasn't going to let that happen again. Hollie and her friends went out on a night out, and Asher just kind of turned up. He was waiting outside of the bar, hanging around, insisting that Hollie came home with him, and he basically just stood there watching her and causing trouble. They moved on to other bars, and Asher was there again, causing arguments and basically trying to get her to go home with him. He didn't want her out with her friends. He wanted her at all times where he could see her and control her and know what she was doing. Eventually, they did end the night, and it was basically ruined by Asher because obviously he was there all the time. He wasn't invited. She was going out to have fun with her friends, have a dance, and he was there making arguments and things like that, and it just ruined the night. After a little while, Hollie's father, Nick, started noticing changes in her behaviour. So after she'd spent time with Asher and got home, she would always be really agitated and aggressive. And then after about an hour or so, this would subside and she would go back to the normal, fun, bubbly Hollie. And this obviously worried her father. A few weeks after being back from a cruise, Hollie suddenly decided that she wanted to move to London with Asher. He'd arranged for them to stay with his cousin, so she got a job, and off they went. They moved to London. She was quite excited to get her own place with a boyfriend, like normal couples would be. And Hollie's parents would go and visit her often, take her out for meals, things like that. And on one occasion, they took her out for a meal, and Asher was nowhere to be seen. So they had asked her, "Where's Asher?" And she kind of made up excuses for him and told them that he was poorly. A little later on, they actually overheard her on the phone to him, and he was saying, "Don't let them take you away from me." Now, this is a really weird statement. They were her parents. It was as if he'd lost her once. He didn't want to lose her again. He was scared that they would take her back home. And in London, she was separated from them. She was separated from her friends. It was more what Asher wanted, in a sense, because he basically could dictate her life if her friends and things weren't in it to take her away from him. He had to know what she was doing every moment of every day, and he was becoming so obsessive. And I don't actually think she really thought that much of it. She didn't really see any danger. She just probably thought that that's how he was, that's what he was like. It was on the 18th of May 2013 when Asher and Hollie actually travelled up to Gloucester for Hollie's mother's birthday. And Hollie was so happy to be back home. She was taking pictures of the meal and the restaurant and the family, and she was just having a load of fun. Asher, however, got really drunk, and whilst he was drunk, his mask kind of slipped. He'd always portrayed himself as a really nice person towards her family, and obviously now that he was drunk, he started to become a bit abusive towards Hollie. He was really rude. He was doing things like clicking his fingers and ordering waiter and staff around abruptly and really rudely, and being rude towards them and the family. And I think Hollie was quite embarrassed of him at this point. Now, when Asher did actually step outside, her family asked her if everything was okay. Obviously, he was acting horrendously, and she said, "Oh yeah, he's fine. Sometimes he just gets like that when he's drunk." She just brushed it off. But what they actually didn't know, what nobody knew, was that previously Asher had been actually arrested 4 times for offences related to domestic violence. So obviously the next day they went back to London. A bit later on, they attended Notting Hill Carnival with Asher's family. And at this point, they'd been living together for over 2 months. At some point during the day, Hollie actually got separated in the crowd from Asher, and he went mental. He tried ringing her, they didn't know where she was. He was furious. So when eventually they did find each other again, he snapped. He either pushed her to the ground or hit her to the ground. And Hollie was, of course, absolutely devastated that this had happened to her. The person that she was living with, that she loved, had actually been violent towards her. She didn't know how to handle it or what to do about it. So because of this, she thought, I need to get away from him. She rang her father like the following morning and arranged for him to pick her up. He just dropped everything straight away, and of course he came to get her. Things kind of started looking up for Hollie when she returned to Gloucester. She got a new job at a different salon. She was just happy and returning back to her normal self. And at the new salon, she was really impressing her new boss, Shan Preisler. And her family said she was generally just being more social and very happy. Then suddenly Asher moved back too. Now, while Hollie was back, she did actually continue texting him and contacting him throughout. I think she just really found it difficult to fully end it completely. Obviously, she really loved him, but sometimes that's what you have to do. You just have to end it. Asher was very manipulative. So when she would say, try and end it kind of thing, he would then buy her things. He would take her out for meals. He would make her feel really good about herself, make her feel that he'd changed in a sense. And then she was happy again. But all he ever wanted was just to keep her under his control. Asher never gave Hollie any space. He would turn up at her work just as they were closing up. Sometimes he'd wait even 40 minutes for her outside, just so that he knew where she was and what she was doing at all times. He would constantly text and phone her. Her parents even said that they could hear her phone constantly going off in her bedroom, and at night time she would actually have to turn it off because it was that incessant that she would have never even been able to sleep with it keep ringing all the time, so she would turn it off. Hollie's parents were actually informed by someone that he'd been loitering around the house, and one day he turned up at 12 o'clock at night. He was drunk and he asked if he could come in. That's when her parents said, we don't want Asher coming round anymore, especially not turning up at the house drunk. It was around about Christmas when Hollie seemed completely different. She was very quiet, she always looked worried, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. And this is when she finally told her father that she was going to end it with Asher. And over the next 2 months, she does try to end it with Asher, but he won't accept it. Hollie did eventually put her foot down, and it was actually on Valentine's Day when she said, I'm going to take him out for a meal, we're going to go to a public restaurant, and I'm going to end it. Now, the fact that she felt like she had to do it in a public place immediately screams that she was scared of him. She didn't know how he would react when she ended it, so she wanted it done in a place where he wouldn't be able to attack her or do whatever, because there would have been couples all around them and would have seen. So when she did end it, Asher was obviously not happy. He started shouting at her. He told her that she had a cold heart. Hollie then went to a car and Asher barged into a car. He grabbed a bank card and he quickly went out across the road and drew out £300 from a bank. When Hollie got home, she received texts from him, and they were threatening to smash up her house. Basically threatened her entire family. And this is when her parents said, listen, I think we need to go to the police. He's becoming violent, he's spiralling. We need to get some help. Hollie agreed and they went to the police, and this is where the family found out all of the terrible things that Asher had actually been doing or saying to her. And they never ever knew before this. And these things were like, he threatened her, he would beat her up, he would ruin her career, he would scar her beautiful looks, even as far as throwing acid in her face. I just can't comprehend how horrible it must have been for Hollie to be receiving these threats from the person that's supposed to love her and she loved, and he's threatening to throw acid in her face. It's just unbelievable. On the 16th of February 2014, the police go out to arrest Asher. They obviously can't have him threatening her and her family like this, so they go out to collect him. But they check his previous addresses, they trowel the streets, they just can't find him anywhere. And when Asher does find out that she's contacted the police, he is furious. He threatens her, the whole family, and again, they all start to get really worried that he's going to turn up and hurt one of them, or Hollie. He was turning out to be such a violent and dangerous man. One of the texts he even sent her said, It's Asher, ring me now, or this bat's going to hit your dad's head. I don't want to get violent as I'll take it too far. And that's just what he did. 2 days later, Asher was spotted on CCTV in Gloucester Town Centre arguing with some staff in a shop. A bit later on, he was then spotted buying a 12-inch kitchen knife from a store. It had been a year since Asher and Hollie met and fell in love, and now he was being searched for by the police for threatening and dangerous behaviour towards her. Hollie was at work. She basically told her boss, Shan, if Asher comes in, don't make a scene, just go to the back and please ring the police, which they'd agreed to earlier on. And this was the plan as to what they were going to do. Then around 6:30 p.m. that night, Shan was cutting a gentleman's hair when Asher walks in. She left a client, walked over to Asher, said hello to him. He said hello back. She then proceeded to walk to the back of the salon. Whilst Hollie was walking towards her, she held up her phone and showed her that she was going to ring the police like they'd agreed to. So while she was then on the phone to the police, she heard a load of commotion. She leant backwards to try and see what was going on. That's when she saw her clients running towards her, and even one of them said, "There's a knife." Asher stabbed Hollie 14 times within the space of 2 minutes. He then dumped the knife, changed his clothes and got into a taxi and left. Now Hollie was obviously rushed to the hospital, but despite medics' best efforts, she unfortunately didn't make it. The police immediately contact the family and let them know the horrible news, and they actually have to take them into like a safe house because Asher was on the run. He'd threatened her family as well, so they needed to keep them safe. And it was around 8 hours later that Asher was actually located at a friend's house, and he was arrested for the murder of Hollie. On the 16th of July 2014, Asher appeared in court, and he showed no remorse whatsoever for what he'd done. He didn't have any respect for anyone in the courtroom, and he was just sat there sniggering and smiling. It appeared like he didn't even think that he'd done anything wrong. He did plead guilty to the murder of Hollie Gazzard and was sentenced to life in prison. And I actually do remember this case when it was all over the media when it first happened. And I just remember how scary and horrific it actually was. There were clear signs of escalation in this case. And Hollie was young. She thought that she could deal with it herself at first. Then she did get the police involvement. And it's so sad that they couldn't actually find him, because if they had managed to find him, Hollie would probably be here with us today. And this would have never happened. And that fact is just so hard to bear, especially for her friends and family. And on that fateful day, she went to work. She didn't, I think in her head, I think she thought he was dangerous, but I think nobody would ever think that he would do something like that in a place of work, in a public place where people would be. She would have never imagined that he was capable of such a horrendous act. And it's really heartbreaking that Hollie was only 20 years old when her life was stolen from her by a jealous, controlling man who probably had the mentality, if I can't have you, no one will. My heart goes out to the Gazzard family and friends on losing such a special young life. And Hollie's family did go on to set up a trust in Hollie's name to help young people not go through what Hollie did, trying to honour her memory and create something positive out of what happened to her so that she didn't die in vain. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Hollie Gazzard. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!